Who is the MVP from every arc in One Piece? Well, that's what we'll go over in today's video. So, let's just kick things off with the very first arc, Romance Dawn. Here, we see Luffy rescue Koby and Zoro, Rika giving Zoro food when he's tied up by the Marines and starving, so who gets the MVP of this arc? Well, it's gotta be Shanks. I mean, come on. He saved Luffy from a Sea King using his Conqueror's Haki and literally lost his arm in the process. And rescuing Luffy literally made the entire story of One Piece possible, so it's a no-brainer that Shanks gets the MVP of Romance Dawn. Next, we have the Orangetown arc, where Luffy and Zoro go up against Buggy and the Buggy Pirates, with Luffy eventually winning the battle by sending Buggy flying. So, is Luffy the MVP? Well, no. The MVP's gotta be Zoro. First, he saved Luffy from being killed by Buggy as he picked him up inside a stone cage that weighs a ton and then carried him to safety, all while getting dealt a hefty stab wound by Buggy. And to top it off, he defeated Buggy's right-hand man, Kabaji. So, Zoro's the MVP here. On to the Syrup Village arc, and the MVP here is definitely Usopp. Now, sure, Luffy took out this arc's big bad villain, Captain Kuro, but Usopp's the one who really stepped up in this arc. He fought off Kuro and his crew by himself for a while, and then he took down Django to save Kaya while being injured. So Usopp really showed his heart and bravery, and that's why he's the MVP of Syrup Village. Now, we get to the Baratie arc, and once again, Luffy takes out this arc's main villain, which was Don Krieg. And he truly showed that he's a big MVP candidate with his strength and determination. But Luffy still doesn't get his first MVP, as the MVP here goes to Sanji. Even though feeding Jin kind of backfired, you've got to respect his decision. Then he had to fight both Pearl and Jin back to back. And last but not least, Sanji saved Luffy from drowning at the end of the arc. So even though Luffy continues to handle the big bad guys of the arcs, Sanji's the one who really shined in this one. Moving on to the Arlong Park arc, and finally, after 5 arcs, Luffy gets his first MVP. He might have fallen asleep during Nojiko's story about Belmere, but that's just because Luffy doesn't need a reason or any extra motivation to save his friend. Later, after a tough fight against the tyrannical fishman Arlong, he finally ended his reign of terror over Nami and Kokoyashi Village. So Luffy's pure determination to protect his friends no matter what is what makes him the MVP of this arc, no question. Next up, we get to Loguetown, and I think everyone knows who's the MVP of this arc, Luffy's father, Monkey D. Dragon. If not for Dragon stepping in to save his son, Luffy would have been captured by Smoker. And let's not forget the whole execution platform situation, where a lightning strike saved Luffy when he was inches from being executed by Buggy. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm very sure that was Dragon's doing, not some random stroke of luck. So yeah, Dragon's the MVP here. Without him, Luffy's journey would have ended right then and there. Making our way to the Grand Line, we reach the Reverse Mountain arc. Here, the Straw Hats get some much-needed guidance from Crocus, as he gave Nami a log pose and also explained some secrets about this iconic ocean. But Crocus isn't the MVP of this arc. That title easily goes to Luffy, who gets his second MVP of the video as he saved Laboon's life. Literally. By painting the Straw Hat's Jolly Roger on Laboon's head, he made sure the giant whale stopped hitting his head against the mountain. He also challenged him to a fight and called it a tie, promising to come back one day for a rematch, giving Laboon hope and a reason to smile again. Reaching the first island on the Grand Line, we have the Whiskey Peak arc, and once again we have a clear MVP winner. This time it's Zoro. He took down 100 Baroque Works members on his own, and get this, he did it while he was drunk. Yup, right after that wild drinking session, Zoro still managed to show up and take out all the enemies. It was an insane display of his strength and determination. Next up, we get to the Little Garden arc, and who's the MVP here? Well, we have Luffy, who takes down Mr. 3, and we also have Usopp, who was a big factor in saving Zoro, Nami, and Vivi from the Wax Candle set. But even though both of them had their moments, let's be real. This arc belongs to Sanji. This is where Mr. Prince is born, and he absolutely deserves that MVP title. If you don't agree, just hear me out. Sanji stumbles upon Mr. 3's hideout and stops reinforcements from coming by tricking Mr. Zero, which is of course Crocodile, by telling him that Luffy has already been dealt with. And let's not forget that he managed to get an Alabasta log pose, which the crew desperately needed. So although Luffy once again had to do the fighting, it was Sanji's intelligence and tactical thinking that really saved the day. Now let's talk about the Drum Island arc, and if you think Luffy missed out on his MVP award in the last arc, he more than earns it here. So Luffy gets his third MVP, and for good reason. Not only did he have to climb that huge mountain to save Nami, but he also literally held Sanji with his teeth to keep him from falling. And it doesn't stop there. He also protected Dr. Hiriluk's Jolly Roger from Wapol. Finally reaching the Alabasta arc, and this arc has a lot of characters giving MVP-like performances. Like Pell, who made the ultimate sacrifice by carrying Crocodile's time bomb high into the sky to protect the city, saving countless lives in the process, which he somehow survived. But he's not the MVP here, so what about Luffy? After fighting Crocodile 3 times, he was finally able to take down the Warlord and liberate Alabasta. So surely he's the MVP, right? Not really. The MVP in Alabasta is Sanji. Mr. Prince makes his triumphant return when he swoops in to save Luffy, Nami, Zoro, Vivi, and even Smoker from drowning in Crocodile's deadly trap. So Sanji's quick thinking and badassery really outshine the rest of the characters in this epic arc. Moving on to the Jaya arc, and I know what you're all thinking. Luffy's easily the MVP. I know, he knocked out Bellamy with one punch, taking revenge for him attacking Cricket. But no, Luffy barely misses out on the MVP award here, and I can already see the comments, but hear me out. The MVP of Jaya has to go to Nami, as I think she played a bigger role in this arc than Luffy. Because when the crew was riding the knock-up stream, it was Nami's insane navigation skills and weather knowledge that saved everyone. She figured out how to navigate the stream so perfectly that the Going Merry stayed on course. Without her, the Merry would have fallen off the stream and crashed, which would have been game over for the entire crew. Luffy's punch might have been the highlight, but the survival of the Straw Hats in this arc was all thanks to Nami. That's why she absolutely deserves the MVP of Jaya. Reaching the legendary Sky Island Skypiea, and the MVP here is definitely Sanji. This guy had some major moments throughout the arc. He delivered the final blow on Satori, messed up Enel's arc Maxim, and I know you haven't forgotten that he saved Usopp and Nami with his iconic "I needed a light" moment. However, Nami, who played a huge role in navigating through Skypiea and outsmarting Enel, and Luffy, who of course took down Enel in the end, both deserve a shout for MVP, but Sanji edges it out on both of them. Now, everyone's favorite arc, the Long Ring Longland arc, where we see Luffy with an afro. So, Luffy's gotta be the MVP here, right? Like, it's Luffy with an afro, come on, that's easily MVP worthy. But yeah, he did also take down Foxy and square up against the Marine Admiral Aokiji to let his crew stay safe, so I guess those actions also play a part in him being the MVP here. On to the Water 7 arc, and although we're introduced to a bunch of new characters like the Galley Law Company and the mayor of Water 7 Iceberg, the MVP of this arc is someone very familiar, Sanji. He snuck onto the sea train like a total ninja to follow Robin. He also came through big time when he saved Franky and Sogeking from the CP9. So once again, Sanji was working behind the scenes, proving why he's such a clutch member of the crew. Right after the Water 7 arc, we of course get to the Enies Lobby arc. Here, Luffy showed off his second and third gear, took down Blueno, and then at last defeated Rob Lucci. But Luffy isn't the MVP here. The MVP is none other than the Going Merry. When it seemed like the Straw Hats were doomed by the Buster Call, the Going Merry showed up in the most epic way to save them all. It literally sailed itself to rescue the crew, defying all odds and proving its undying loyalty right to the very end. So although Luffy had some iconic moments in this arc, none of that would have mattered if the Going Merry hadn't been there to get everyone out alive. Heading back to Water 7, we enter the Post-Enies Lobby arc, where I have to give a triple MVP, Franky, Iceberg, and the Galley Law. But why? Because they all worked tirelessly together to create the ultimate ship that could take the Straw Hats all the way to the One Piece, the Thousand Sunny. But yeah, that was the only triple MVP in this video, don't worry. Moving on to the Thriller Bark arc, and do I even need to say who the MVP is? It's of course Zoro. When Kuma showed up to take out Luffy, Zoro stepped in to stop the Warlord. Kuma then used his Devil Fruit powers to knock out everyone, but Zoro rose and continued to protect his captain. Kuma then made Zoro a deal that he would leave Luffy alone if Zoro took on all of Luffy's pain. Zoro agreed, knowing full well it would most likely kill him. When Sanji then jumped in and offered to share the burden, Zoro knocked him out to protect him too. He then gave us One Piece fans one of the most iconic moments in anime history, the Nothing Happened moment. Alright, moving on to the Sabaody Archipelago arc, and who could possibly be the MVP here? Maybe one of the new generation pirates? No, the MVP actually goes to the character who almost killed Zoro in the last arc, Bartholomew Kuma. When the crew was completely outmatched by Kizaru, Sentomaru, and the Pacifistas, it looked like the end for the Straw Hats. But Kuma had other plans. Instead of letting them be captured or killed, he used his powers to send each crew member to a different location, places where he knew they would grow stronger. Although absolutely no one knew that Kuma had good intentions, not Kizaru, not Luffy, not even us viewers, Kuma's actions were exactly what they needed to survive and come back even stronger. So that's why Kuma's the undeniable MVP of Sabaody. After the crew gets sent away by Kuma, we follow Luffy to the Amazon Lily arc. Here we meet the pirate empress, Boa Hancock, who eventually falls in love with Luffy and decided she wanted to help him get to Impel Down to free his brother. Although this is MVP worthy, Luffy's gotta take the MVP award here. He fought Sandersonia and Marigold, ultimately protected Sandersonia's slave mark from being exposed, and later proved his worth to Hancock herself. So, as he had to fight his way to get Hancock to eventually help him, I think he deserves to add another MVP to his tally. Reaching the Impel Down arc, and here we have a clear MVP winner, Bon Clay. First, he saved Luffy's life after Magellan's poison nearly killed him, staying by his side and begging Ivankov to help, which definitely deserves a shout-out for Ivankov too. But Bon Clay didn't stop there. When it came time for the big escape, he sacrificed himself to open the gates, allowing everyone else to continue to Marineford. His bravery and selflessness in this arc were absolutely unmatched, so he's the MVP of this arc, no question. So after escaping Impel Down, we get to one of the most intense arcs in all of One Piece, the Marineford arc, and let me tell you, this arc is packed with MVP-worthy performances. For example, Crocodile shocked everyone by saving both Ace and Luffy at critical moments, Jinbe and Law both had major parts to play in saving Luffy, and Koby stood up to Aka Inu and nearly died just to beg for reason and peace. Oh, and of course Shanks, who stepped in to stop the war and the bloodshed. But as incredible as all these characters were in this arc, they just missed the top spot. Why? Because there are two characters that were just one step above everyone else. And as they are on opposite sides, one of them being a Marine and one being a pirate, it's only fair to name two MVPs in this arc, as I actually can't decide who deserves it over the other. So, let's start with the Marine side. And here we have Aka Inu, who truly played a huge role for the Marines. He manipulated Squard into betraying Whitebeard, weakening the pirate forces from the inside. He was then responsible for Ace's death, completing the Marines' primary mission, and he also dealt some of the most devastating damage to Whitebeard, contributing heavily to his eventual demise. So Aka Inu was ruthless, efficient, and undeniably crucial to the Marines' victory. And on the pirate side, we have Whitebeard. He led his crew into battle knowing full well that this was likely a suicidal last stand for himself, but he did it to save his beloved son. Even after being mortally wounded and surrounded by enemies, he held his ground and made one of the most iconic proclamations in the series: "The One Piece is real." That line alone reignited the pirate era and threw the world government's supposed victory into question. His selflessness, strength, and loyalty make him the MVP on the pirate side without question. So, who do you think deserves to be the MVP of the Marineford arc? Give me a comment down below. Okay, let's continue with the post-war arc, and the MVP here has to be Jinbe. Luffy was at his absolute lowest, devastated by Ace's death and spiraling into a destructive rage. So Jinbe stepped up and reminded Luffy what he still had to live for, which was exactly what Luffy needed to hear to pull himself out of despair. He then also helped Luffy come up with a plan moving forward, so that's why Jinbe's the undeniable MVP of the post-war arc. Now we get to the Return to Sabaody arc, where the Straw Hats reunite after training for 2 years. Although it's a short arc, we have a clear MVP winner, Bartholomew Kuma. Why? Because he literally stayed at Sabaody for 2 years to protect the Thousand Sunny from all the pirates and threats that could have destroyed it. So if this determination doesn't get an MVP award, I don't know what will. Reaching the first island on their journey to the New World, we get to the Fishman Island arc. So, who's the MVP here? Well, we have Jinbe, who truly stepped up at the end of the arc when he gave Luffy blood to save him. But the MVP of this arc is, of course, without a doubt, Luffy. He saved Shirahoshi from Vanderdecken, took down the tyrant Hody Jones, who had been causing chaos on Fishman Island, and eventually he declared Fishman Island under the protection of the Straw Hat Pirates standing up against a Yonko. For all of that, Luffy is the unquestionable MVP of the Fishman Island arc. Next up, we have the Punk Hazard arc. And the MVP here is definitely Trafalgar Law. This is the arc where we all really started to fall in love with Law, as aside from Luffy, it's he who truly puts in the work here. Law takes Smoker's heart, forms an alliance with Luffy, takes down Virgo, and eventually destroys the entire Punk Hazard lab. But what really makes Law the MVP is his genius switcheroo play with Caesar Clown. Law tricked Caesar into thinking he had Smoker's heart when it was actually Monet's. That move was next level, because if he hadn't done a quick switcheroo with their hearts, Caesar would have killed Smoker, and Monet would have detonated the entire island, wiping out everyone. So yeah, Law deserves the MVP for Punk Hazard. Now, let's talk about the Dressrosa arc, and the MVP here is definitely Usopp, or should I say, God Usopp. This man basically straight up saved all of Dressrosa twice, by taking out Sugar twice. But of course, we can't forget Luffy. He did take down Doflamingo and ultimately liberated Dressrosa. But none of that would have happened without Usopp setting the stage and pulling off the big moves. So, for Dressrosa, Usopp's the true MVP. Moving on to the Zou arc, and first up, we've got to talk about Chopper and even Caesar Clown for saving the minks from the poison with their knowledge and skills. But the true MVP, or rather MVPs, are the minks themselves. They put their lives on the line as they lied to protect the location of Raizo. Despite being tortured and eventually even having to endure poisonous gas, they still kept Raizo's location a secret, never giving up. Next up, we have the Whole Cake Island arc, and the MVP here is definitely Brook. First off, Brook copied the road poneglyph. Then, he went head-to-head with Big Mom herself in a 1 vs 1, showing off his true bravery, and later, he broke Mother Carmel's portrait, which sent Big Mom into a frenzy. Oh, and we can't forget that Brook cut up Zeus and even asked to see Big Mom's panties, as he usually does. So, yeah, Brook's without a doubt the MVP of Whole Cake Island. Before we get to the Wano Country arc, we have the Reverie arc, and even though Dragon declared war against the world government, which is of course an MVP-worthy thing to do, the true MVP has to be the Celestial Dragon Mjosgard. Wow, I never thought I'd say those words. But this guy stepped up in a huge way by taking a stand against Charlos when he tried to take Shirahoshi as his personal property, and Mjosgard didn't hesitate to deliver a powerful punch. And this moment might be even more important than people realize. If Mjosgard hadn't stepped in to stop Charlos, Shirahoshi, who, as we all know, is one of the ancient weapons, Poseidon, she could have ended up in the hands of the world nobles. And let's face it, that would have been a disaster for literally everyone. So yeah, Mjosgard absolutely deserves the MVP for the Reverie arc. Finally, we get to the Wano Country arc, but who's the MVP here? Well, we have Zoro, who did some serious heavy lifting during this arc, from getting the cure for the ice virus, to protecting Luffy while he was recovering, to saving Hiyori and Toko. And let's not forget, Zoro did what only Oden had ever done before. He left a lasting scar on Kaido. That's a huge accomplishment and definitely worthy of recognition. But the MVP in this arc, can you guess who it is? Well, I've got to give it to Luffy, as he eventually took down Kaido and liberated Wano after 2 decades of endless agony. Of course, it wasn't just him alone, as he had a ton of support from his crew and allies to wear down Kaido, but in the end, it was he who dealt the final blow with his Gear 5 form. So he takes the crown for the MVP of the Wano Country arc. Leaving Wano, we reach the Egghead Island arc, and the first character I've got to talk about is Emeth. Emeth guarded Vegapunk's dying message, fought the 5 elders, and even released Joy Boy's Haki to help everyone escape. But even though this would have gotten the MVP award in almost any other arc, there is one character who did even more than Emeth. And no, it's not Luffy, it's Sanji. Instead of explaining everything he did in detail, I'm just gonna list it all out. He defeated S-Shark, saved Robin, saved Edison, saved Nami twice, saved Kuma twice, saved Bonnie a lot of times actually, even one time even blocking Kizaru's laser to save her. Helped send the Elder Mars away, speed blitzed the Elder Nusturo, blocked his blade, and even injured him. And oh, he did half of this while carrying Vegapunk, yet he isn't tired and doesn't have a scratch on him. And last but not least, he gave the orders to the crew and the Giants to organize the escape. So yeah, that's just an insane performance by Sanji. As the crew has left Egghead and is on Elbaf right now, we still don't know who the MVP of this arc is gonna be, but I'm sure there's a lot of insane things yet to come. Comment down below who you think's gonna be the MVP of the Elbaf arc. Thanks for watching, and watch this video next.